Alright, so many cyber mods have been completely revamped with update 2.0. We have a lot better options now, the meta has been completely shifted, and even a few new surprises that are much better than before and even enable cool new builds and interactions. So we're going to talk about Sandevistans, Berserks, Cyberdecks, but also some of my favorite cyber implants for some of the other slots that could make any build very strong. Now, one of the biggest surprises of 2.0 is the Berserk Cyberware, because this has gone through a massive revamp and is now much better, even on par and sometimes exceeding some of the other operating systems in terms of at least melee builds. So at full max level, iconic and legendary quality, the two of the best options in the Berserk category are the Militech Berserk and the Biodyne version. This depends if you like a lot more survivability versus a lot more damage. However, both of them are great at survivability still. So the Militech is the only one that comes with complete invulnerability to damage for its entire duration. Plus, its cooldown is some of the lowest for this type, just 35 seconds or 30 if you go with one level of upgrades. But some of the other melee bonuses are also nice, like the attack speed, the massive stamina cost reduction, and the movement speed means that even builds like the two-handed hammer from yesterday are definitely a solid option for the Militech Berserk. But by far its best bonus is the damage at the bottom. So if you let your character drop at 20% HP, you will gain a massive 50% bonus to damage. So what you can do is to just let targets take you down to that HP level of 20%, lock in your health by activating the Berserk, and then just gain that massive bonus to damage that lets you almost one-shot anything, even on the hard difficulty. This in fact is a very great counter against the max stack if you want to stay in the middle of them and just destroy them without stopping. But like I said, the Biodyne is also a great alternative. So this comes with some extra critical chance and critical damage, but it does lose a bit on the movement speed, and it doesn't get complete immunity, but rather just immunity once you drop at or below 25% HP. Which is still good because you still get the health regen once you are finished with it. This is a much better variant for something that uses blades, like mantis blades, katanas. A blade build is the perfect option for this kind of cyber implant. You're going to use this instead of the previous one, but again, you can mix and match however you want. Also, Biodyne has the advantage of having lower level variants that you can get as early as like 10 to 15 because it has an uncommon quality one. So you can just upgrade this along the way until level 50 or at least until 30 to 35, and you can start getting the purple and then the legendary variant of the Militech. Now, we also talked about Sandevistans and the fact that the quaint variant from Fingers has been completely replaced with the Warp Dancer. This is arguably much worse and mostly aimed towards builds that focus on high defenses, mitigation, and resistances. So the one that replaces the previous quaint is actually going to be the Militech Apogee Sandevistan. Actually, there are two, again, Militech variants, very good. One is the Apogee and there's also the Falcon. They kind of do slightly different things. But when it comes to headshots, damage, and also cooldown reduction, by far the best is the Apogee. This can reach significantly better cooldown reductions with proper builds, even compared to the Quaint from 163. Like, if you can take down with certain builds like 5 or 6 targets during its duration, you can literally jump into another Sandevistan slow time effect immediately after that, or no more than 1 second. This is why it's one of the best options for throwing daggers kinds of builds and with silencer weapons. If you want to see a build like that, I do have one ready. So let me know down below if you want me to cover that in a future video. I can definitely do so. But it also comes with that headshot damage, which is why I said those two types of builds work the best. You also gain the critical damage and the critical chance, both really good. And you also extend the duration. It's by far the highest extend duration bonus of 20%, plus a very good reduction, or well, bonus to stamina in this case, as you neutralize targets. There's also the Falcon, like I said, but the cooldown for this one is slightly longer, like 10-15 seconds, give or take. Otherwise, you no longer have to worry about headshot damage. You can just have the 10% damage, so this works for anything that doesn't necessarily rely on headshots. Plus, the critical chance just slightly smaller and the critical damage is the same, but it's also a little bit better at healing you, while the extended duration is much lower. But with proper cyberware and builds, this can also be brought to relatively very low cooldowns. There are some lower level variants we covered before, like the Dynalar at the very low and like 10 15 levels. You can then jump to its rare variant, or even go with the Zeta tag if you want that. These can be used interchangeably depending on what you want to do, but Dynalar at low level until you get the Militech is probably the best option. Now for the Cyberdeck, surprisingly there are much more options here, and many of them can actually fit all kinds of niche types of builds. However, two of my favorite by far are the Raven Microcyber MK3 when it comes to spread damage, and you can then also use the Militech Paraline MK4 if you're going with that SMG endless reload variant that I also covered a few hours ago. So this depends on the type of Netrunner that you build. If you're going with the build that I just covered, going by a hybrid that also uses monowire and also uses SMGs, not just quick hacks, the Militech Paraline MK4 in my opinion is the best. It also gives you some nice damage boost to your quick hacks. Also monowire gets a nice damage depending on how much VRAM you consume, so up to 30% if you like basically just use all of it. And you can even boost the damage on your smart weapons like the smart SMGs when you activate overclock and have the Militech Paraline on. This is going to give you another 25% of your normal damage as electrical damage, which is what's going to spread all of those shocks and EMPs all around. Again, if you did not watch that, go and totally do so, because it's very fun, very flashy, and it even destroys enemies on the hard difficulty. But you can also use the Raven Microcyber MK3 even for this build with the SMGs and kind of get a hybrid, but it's mostly best suited for a pure Netrunner build that focuses on quick hacks exclusively, spreading quick hacks, and also kind of staying a little back in the lines, not going necessarily out of cover and hacking enemies from afar. So this has a massive 40% spread distance with quick hacks, which is by far the best, if not maybe the only one in the game that does this. Plus, and this is the most important, it immediately applies all spreadable quick hacks to all targets instead of waiting for the initial uploads to finish. So this is even better than any other Cyberdeck before 2.0, especially best with anything that can spread, and even non-spreadable if you go with overclock, because you can make non-spreadable quick hacks like Suicide and Cyberpsychosis to spread when you have overclock installed. But even without that, maybe going something like Contagion, this applies immediately, so it's really good. Now, a lot of people say that quick hacking and net running is bad in 2.0. The reason for that is because you haven't checked the interactions and combos that quick hacks do with one another. So Cyberware Malfunction plus Short Circuit, or Contagion plus Overheat, or Melee Finishers plus Suicide. All of these and many more have a ton of combos and synergies that you need to stack up with one another to make the most out of these. And on the hard difficulty, it's definitely going to work if you do it the right way. Now, in terms of some of the other Cyberware implants, Newton module for the frontal cortex is one of the best, universal one actually, especially if you go with Sandevistan builds. You can reduce the cooldown even more instantly for every enemy that you neutralize, so that still adds up on everything else that you use. Also, a big heads up to Kerenzikov, this no longer works with everything, only with ranged attacks and ranged weapons when you're sliding, dodging or dashing, so it no longer is it possible to use this with katanas or swords or any melee weapons, even with the mono wire, unfortunately. This was nice previously with the Lucy build in 1.6.3, but that no longer triggers Kerenzikov anymore with 2.0, I just wanted to let you guys know. Also, don't put aside the optics, there are a ton of Kiroshi Optics with some really interesting effects, and my favorite are definitely the Oracle and the Stalker. So Oracle is kind of like more general purpose, it just lets me see all targets behind cover in a really good AoE around me, as well as highlighting any cameras, turrets and explosives for about like 60 seconds. So this is a really good way to see things around you when you're trying to take down big groups of enemies, maybe organized crime locations and all of that. But if you're going with something that wants to attack enemies behind cover at very large distances, maybe in a whole building, then the Stalker is a much better variant. Your field of vision of these enemies through walls is much more reduced, basically just in front of you, but you can see much deeper within the walls, which means you can better target those enemies at much further away than you. Also, a couple of very interesting hand upgrades are the handle wrap and the shock absorber. This is definitely something that you might want with the smart link or maybe with the ballistic processor if you also get ambidextrous, so that you can now place two in the same hands category. And especially the handle wrap, this is what you're going to always go with throwables. This is going to give you a massive boost to them, 23% critical chance for 6 seconds as you throw them, so it's definitely worth it. But you can also combine this and boost the critical chance when you're switching from throwables and so on. And the shock absorber, if you're going with anything that goes with headshots, maybe you're playing with a silencer build and want to use this, it's definitely worth it. Now for stealth builds, optical camo also became a lot more important, and there's a very good synergy with the cool attributes. Now on its own, it reduces visibility, which is pretty great, but in the cool category we have two that directly effective. One of them is the creeping death, so if you take down enemies while the optical camo is active, you do gain health back, stamina and movement speed. But you can also go with the vanishing act, which is even better. So now this lets you consume its charge gradually instead of instantly while crouch sprinting or sliding. So the way it works is really awesome, because now you don't have to wait for the cooldown to go full back up. Instead, you can gradually consume it at any time, if it's of course available, as you crouch sprint, which with the cool skill line and the feline footwork and some of the other stuff like the ninjutsu, it's a very valid way of playing and a very strong option of playing, which brings a whole bunch of other benefits. Obviously, don't forget heal on kill. This is literally amazing on any build. As you neutralize enemies, you gain 7% of your health back. So as you take more and more down, you can regenerate even more on top of all the other sources of regeneration that you get. Everything else from this point on is mostly situational. So yeah, between this and all the other stuff with the damage reduction and everything else, you're going to want to pick them depending on the build and depending on the things that you're doing, like dance marrow and micro rotors. If you're going with a melee build, you're obviously going to want these in the skeleton and the circulatory system. But yeah, this is pretty much it with everything that I wanted to cover for now. I'm gonna follow soon with a best weapons build in 2.0, because there have been some massive changes and meta shifts over there too. So I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. In the meantime, go ahead and check out maybe some of the others, including some of the best secrets and amazing changes that came up with update 2.0. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.